Wrath and Grace Radio listeners, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Kepler Education.
Kepler is a consortium of independent teachers offering classes in all subjects for grades 7 through 12 and beyond.
Unified by a shared vision for classical education, innovative technology, and the historic Christian faith,
Kepler teachers prepare students for a professional and private life well lived, and they do it around a schedule and a budget tailored to the needs of your family. And I'm not just excited about Kepler because they are one of our sponsors, but I too am a Kepler teacher within the consortium. So come check us out at kepler.education.
Kepler is not a traditional online school. It is a consortium of independent online educators unified by a common vision to bring a Christian and classical education to junior high and high school students.
All right, what's up, everybody? We are doing things a little different right now, but this is another episode of Wrath and Grace Radio, and today we are talking about truth, beauty, and goodness, man. And we're out in the lovely Savannah, Georgia, taking in the scenes, and we decided to hit you with some content while on the go. And so, man, truth, beauty, and goodness, guys, when we talk about that, first, why even lump those three things together, right? You can talk about truth, you can talk about beauty, you can talk about goodness as three separate things, but we consistently connect the three things together. So why do you think that is, Nick?
Well, these are categories that historically have been used to describe sort of the aims of humanity, that as human beings, that these are the things that we're striving to discover, to uphold, to work within, and really without, it's sort of like the scales, you want them to be balanced out, and if you don't have all three of those at play, and you sort of emphasize one over the other, and they're not all sort of on this place where you're trying to get the levels right, then you're going to be, it's going to be so unbalanced that the others that need to be emphasized will just be forgotten, they'll be pushed aside, and the importance of those elements will disappear. And so we need to find the way to balance them and keep them as a central focus together. It's really, as we talk about them individually, at the same time, you can't really think of them apart from one another.
Yeah. So you become disproportionate, and usually what you have is, especially in Christianity, an emphasis on one of those to the detriment of the others. So in our circles, maybe more of an emphasis on truth and a lack of emphasis on anything related to beauty or even perhaps goodness, right?
Right.
So these three things, I mean, you've probably heard them. Christians have heard these: truth, beauty, goodness. They're called the transcendentals, or those three aspects of God's character that should shine forth in human productions. So the things that people make and the things that we produce should have these three marks on them for, as you're saying, a well-rounded production.
Yeah. And I would agree. I think in my personal experience, right, truth has always been a big deal. It's super emphasized. No matter what we're doing, truth is kind of king. But the beauty, right, or even thinking about how we do church or how we do our show, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is we're doing, right? Why is not just doing something truthfully but beautifully, right? Why does that matter?
Yeah. So we're talking about aesthetics, right? So again, this gets into image of God. What does it mean to be an image bearer? Image bearing is not just some invisible thing that we do. It's not just the morality that we put forward, but we're physically the image of God. We're image bearers in body, and so the way that we look and our sensory experience of the world matters. And as image bearers who are called to bring things in subjection to God, we have to bring beauty into the physical creation. That's what we were designed to do, right? And so it's a contradiction to focus so much on truth, but maybe give that truth in a package that is not done well, that doesn't have excellence, that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
That can be a stumbling block because you're saying something about the truth itself if you don't go through the effort to present something that is pleasing to the sight, pleasant, beautiful.
Yeah.
So books, think of all that stuff. Websites.
Yes.
Book covers.
Yeah. Sir Roger Scruton wrote about this a lot, the idea of beauty and how we think about beauty. But if you think of it like this, we talk about God as being all beautiful. And if that's that's true of him, then our work, our thinking, our production of whatever it is should be a reflection of that as those created in his image as well. And so, as Luke was saying, as this is one of the transcendental realities of life as a human being created in the image of God, then what we do and how we should do it should be a reflection. And we should strive for that to be a greater reflection. It's never going to be all beautiful. But beauty is an objective reality. We have to, and we've talked about this before, we have to recognize this truth that beauty is objective. That we can look at something and objectively say it is beautiful. That doesn't mean it's necessarily something that we prefer. It may not be our personal preference, but we can say that it is objectively beautiful. And that's because God is objectively beautiful. And if it's a reflection of who he is, displayed in our humanity, then we want to make sure that that is very much a part of what we're trying to accomplish as Christians.
Now, when we're talking about truth, beauty, and goodness, right? Goodness is a little bit more, it takes a little bit more thinking about, I think, right? I think in general, we know what truth is. I think in general, we have an idea of what's beautiful. You can just look at it and go, man, that's obviously beautiful. But goodness, are we talking about moral goodness? Like, what idea are we trying to get at when we're talking about goodness?
Yeah, so morality is part of truth as well, right? Goodness, I think, speaks to more of the wholesomeness and benefit that comes from things. That it's all around beneficial and shows God's goodness to us through the production. So let's think about something like food, right? A meal. A meal should be done well, and a meal is more than just the nutrients. That might be the truth of the meal. It's got the nutrients and all the things that you need. But it's so much more than that. It should be beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and all the rest. But the entire experience itself should be so wholesome that there's just a goodness to it. It's God's goodness embedded in the whole experience. It looks good, tastes good, is good for me. Boom. It improved me and led me towards God. And I think that's an aspect of the goodness that we need to find in things.
Yeah. Well, and the moral aspect of it is certainly a part of it too. That as salt and light, as those who are seeking to reflect, again, the image of God in the world around us, that we're doing so by not just partaking in, but participating in the goodness of who God is and what He wants the world to see and recognize about who He is. And so we want to reflect that in the way we interact with others, in the way that we have discussions, we engage in relationships, we do business, we engage in the arts, whatever it is that we're doing, that we do so from a place of moral goodness. I think we have a tendency to not emphasize that so much because we don't want to be moralistic, we don't want to be fundamentalist or whatever sort of ideas come out of that kind of language often. But God has given us His law, which is objective, which is true, and embedded in that is the idea that He has determined what is good and what is bad, what is good, what is evil. And if we are His people, we are rightly reflecting His image, then part of that is the goodness that is contrasted with the evil. And so we have these obligations then, especially as Christians, to uphold that which is good morally just as much as what you're talking about, which is very much a part of it as well.
So if I think of, it makes me think of like secular productions, secular music.
Yeah.
And often what you'll find in secular music done by non-Christians may be some truth, like it's based on truth. And beauty, certainly, well done music that's pleasing to the ear, And it's saying true things, but if it lacks that moral backbone, then it becomes something that's not going to be good for you.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good. They may be talking about real life type of stuff, but if it lacks a real morality that reflects God, then it just falls short. It's not the full package,
Yeah.
And so Christians are those who really have to take over the arts once again, take over the sciences.
Absolutely.
Just surrendered all that.
Yeah.
To take over, to once again be those that give these fully orbed productions that have all three of these things.
Yeah, kind of like that, that Jesus is King album. You know what I'm saying?
That's good.
You're gonna get you some of that, right? Now, but no, I want to stay here for a little bit, right? Because we do see that. It seems that error creeps in when you have the absence of one of these three transcendentals, right? Most commonly, like today, you see a lot of people who will say, man, this is beautiful and this is good, but they'll divorce it from what is objectively true.
Right.
And so what examples, what do we see where we have maybe two of the three, right? And how do we see that impact our society, our culture, things we're seeing online, etc.?
So I think if we think about Christians and think about the kind of work that we do, churches, with the media productions of our churches, our sermons, even the layout of our services, or things like Christian books, I think that in the Protestant Reformed Christian community, there is such an emphasis on truth and moral goodness that beauty is a secondary thing to people. They think, if I have all those, it doesn't really matter. It'd be nice if it could be beautiful, if the music that we do could be excellent, or the book cover could look awesome, but it's just so much cheaper to hire this person to make this really ugly book cover for me, and it's got the truth anyway, and truth is all that really matters, so therefore I don't do it. That's incomplete. That book is incomplete. A book is a beautiful thing. It's a manifestation of beauty, and the order of it, the presentation of it, all of that matters. So it's just, you're really cutting the legs out underneath yourself if you simply focus on the truth, what you're saying is right, and it upholds morality. It's going to do good to people who read the book, but it's not nice to look at. I mean, you feel that, don't you? It should be so much more than that. Yeah. So I see that a lot.
Well, I'll go further with that and say that I think at times Christians can even sort of shun beauty, as if it's something that we shouldn't focus on because it appeals to the flesh, or there's something wrong with it.
Exactly.
Right, but the reality is that it's because of the church that we have the arts developed to the extent that they are developed today, in terms of music, in terms of theater, in terms of visual art, in terms of writing. All of these things are very much developments that came throughout the history of the church. I think another sort of imbalance that you see, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, Luke, is that we might see something that is true, something that is beautiful, but as you were saying, we miss out on oftentimes what's the good, because you don't have the objective truth that is directly impacting the outcome. Now we've talked before about things that they're either true or false, and that's objective reality, and people recognize that whether they want to acknowledge it or not. They know that, and will say something is good or bad because they have that law imprinted on them. And it can be very beautiful, but if they are not intentionally seeking to bring out the good in the same pursuit, then you have that imbalance, because then often it crosses into areas that are objectively not good, and even still may be true, may be beautiful, but not good.
I think a lot of movies can be like
exactly
that.
what I was thinking. Yes,
but they will discover a problem, and in that sense, they're truth.
Yes,
they're highlighting something that's wrong. But then they fall short of providing the actual answer and how people should posture themselves against that thing. And that can be very tricky because there's truth in it. You know what I'm saying?
Stories. I think when you think of sort of modern philosophical approaches to the world and life, an area where something like nihilism or postmodernism fail is that it's unresolved.
Exactly. Yes.
That we don't have this idea that things resolve and good triumphs over evil, because that's the story of humanity. That at the end, good will win, and so a story is incomplete, or a story does not highlight goodness when evil wins, because in the end, even in a moment, in a circumstance, the bad guy might win, but overall, good will eventually win.
Like true justice, and true, redemption. These are themes that you should find in those type of stories that will round them out.
But this is a good thing, because to think about that in our current context, something's off if good does not win, right? But what you see in modern stories is they'll make it seem as if good won by calling evil good. right?
Sure.
And so how do we deal with that, right? Because there are narratives that are prevalent today where they're trying to reconcile that same thing, right? Good needs to win in the end, and this is good, right? But the Bible doesn't say that thing is good, right? The Bible says that this is evil, right? And so now we have truth getting flipped upside down on its head, right? And it seems to be like a taking and a distorting of truth, beauty, and goodness, right? That if we're not paying attention, we can miss that. We can feel morally wrong because something will be presented to us and say, man, if good wins and this is good and you're not on this side, right, then you're lacking somehow, or you're off somehow, right? Yeah. And so where are you guys seeing that, right? And obviously film, right? That's what came to mind when we talk about film. Yeah. But any other mediums, or is that just online, social media, the news? Where are we seeing this?
So when we think about film, we're thinking of stories, stories. But even things like music, if I think about hip hop music, which it does involve story, and I don't just mean individual songs that reflect a story, like a storyteller, right? But it's like the story of life. How do you combat difficulties? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the answer to facing injustice, to facing struggle? What's the answer? And if the answer becomes, well, you just live as best as you can right now, you know what I'm saying? Like, party as hard as you can, get as much pleasure as you can. That would be an instance in which that answer is wrong. That's not the thing to do. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you don't find that just in hip hop music. You find that in a lot of music. Yeah. That becomes the human resolve to everything. It's just eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow we die. Yeah. You know?
I thought about this very recently. In Romans 1, Paul talks about not only in man's natural state in his flesh does he do that which is evil, but he gives approval to those who do. And I think there's something of a reality tied into that I think we've probably all, if we're honest, we've watched a movie or read a story and the bad guy is sort of highlighted as the central character. And there's sort of this desire, there's almost this longing to see him get away with it. Like we want to see him, skirt justice or to pull off the heist and not get caught or whatever else. And I think that's something of our sort of our natural fleshly desire coming out, that if I was in that situation, I would want to get away. And he's sort of become the hero of the story.
Sympathetic.
And so it's when that is sort of the thing, when we come to the end of the movie, if the bad guy gets caught and we're sort of let down, there's an imbalance there. But that's really, I think, in so many ways, our favorite TV shows, movies, books, everything else, that really you watch them, you read them, whatever, that is so often what we see as being the case anymore in the shows that we watch, the stories that we read, is it's no longer about sort of the good guys winning in the end. And I think that's created this tremendous imbalance in how we even think about what is good, what is bad, how should a society function, revolving around these three realities, because that's kind of what we're being fed in terms of the story, and our flesh reacts to that in a way that is favorable.
Yeah, and we're going to keep talking about truth, beauty, and goodness, but I do want to give a special shout out to our sponsors, and shout out to Logos Bible Software, shout out to Kepler Education, shout out to Magathy Payments. We're together here in Savannah, Georgia, doing some planning and recording, and without your support, we couldn't do this stuff. And to our listeners, man, support our friends. They support us, support the partners that help bring this content to you, all right? Yes. Where are we winning? Where is the church, if you look back throughout history, or if you look today, where are we winning in the realm of truth, beauty, and goodness? Institutionally, whether it's inventions, whatever it is, like what things can we point at and say, man, like we're winning in these areas? What do you think?
Well, the church sets the tone on this. And by the church, we mean God's people, man, the people that reflect God in this world. The church throughout history, has led the way in this, right? So in the early church, I think you had a very good balance between these things. You had a hard emphasis on truth and combating error, right? You had an emphasis on beauty. You look at the old church structures, and that's what it's beautiful. The old Eastern Orthodox Christian art, all that stuff, is beautiful,
Yeah.
right? And there's an emphasis on that. It mattered that you worship God in a beautiful place, you know. And then goodness. I mean, the morality of the early church was probably too strict in some ways,
Sure.
but at least you do find all three there. That is helpful. But then I think throughout church history, you find this repetition, you know, wherever the truth of God is really celebrated in the gospel.
Yeah.
You know? But modern fundamentalism is where we see kind of the cutting off of that.
Yeah.
In the last 100, 150 years, there's been a real big move against beauty, I would say.
Well, not only that, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of truth. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of goodness in that kind of mindset. Like goodness is something that is solely defined in legal terms. That truth is solely defined in sort of these categories that have been established by a very short amount of history within the church. And if you don't cohere to these things, then you're out. And if you're out, then there's really no hope for you. And I think when we kind of sort of cast what we understand the church to be in those categories, and we're completely missing how it is that throughout history since the beginning of time, it has been God's people that have advanced these things in meaningful ways. Now, I can take a snapshot of any period of history and say there are times when the church has done better in certain areas than others. I think right now, especially in sort of Reformed evangelicalism, more broadly, there's a lot of de-emphasis on beauty, as you were saying. But at the same time, we recognize some of the greatest art of all time has been accomplished by the church. And I think the hope in all of that is that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And so we're not saying that these things will ultimately be lost from the church. But I do think we need to think about those things and how we can introduce those appropriately within the context of encouraging the body of Christ to be productive, to create, and to emphasize these elements in whatever they're doing.
I'd say within evangelical Reformed Christianity, there's a bright spot or two, probably, of hope for the future, of recovering the transcendentals.
Yeah, I think Wrath and Grace Radio is probably at the pinnacle of that.
Possibly.
You said it,
possibly.
not me.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was thinking it.
No lies detected. Now, one thing that I'm sure you have in mind, maybe when you're raising your kids and teaching them, right? You might not use those words, right? You might not sit down with your son. Okay,
yes,
maybe
we
you do.
do.
I don't know. Maybe you do, right? Hey, let's think about truth, beauty, and goodness right now. But,
Absolutely,
but no,
course.
and also, like, what does it look like in terms of how
real.
you're directing and raising and compelling them to action?
Check it. So for me, it's come up situationally, and so much of our parenting is situational.
Yeah.
We got, we have an Xbox, whatever. But we bought a Game Pass, which is a game subscription.
Yeah.
Because, we got kids started playing the games on the phones, which I don't like. So I would rather have them play in the box, and we can all play.
We can see it play.
Game subscription, we can play together, right? Yeah. So when we did that, we just tried out different games or whatever, and the kids started to ask questions. How can you tell the difference between a good game and a bad game, like a game we should play and shouldn't? And that gave me a chance to introduce them to these categories of truth, beauty, goodness. If a game has these categories, it's something consumable, and if not, it shouldn't. And then that expands to all that they consume.
Yeah.
What they watch, what they listen to, what they read. It's a life grid to see, is this something that I should allow within my life? Is this going to benefit me? Does this check all the boxes?
Yeah.
And so doing that has allowed me to begin thinking that way. And I can even see it in my son. One day he came up to me, he was like, "Daddy, are jokes truth, beauty, and goodness?" Which I think they are. I was like, absolutely, they're truth, beauty, and goodness. I mean, they can be, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is awesome for our children, man. I didn't have that as a kid.
Right.
This kind of way to think through stuff.
Right.
And I'm telling, okay, I'll give you an example. Like, I think that there's genres of movies and shows that are done well, like maybe some horror or things that are a little scarier. I think there's some things out there that are done well.
Yeah.
And my son, as a little guy, is, zombies and that stuff is fascinating to him.
Yeah.
But what I told him is, I was like, Judah, you got to trust me. I'll show you the good stuff when you get older.
Yeah.
I'll show you the real stuff. You know what I'm saying? But you got to trust me to show you the good stuff.
Right.
And I think that's helped him You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can do that for sure.
Yeah. So the way we want to emphasize those things is to focus on truth in terms of, especially in terms of biblical truth, to focus our attention on the scriptures, to talk about the scriptures, to teach our children what the Bible teaches. All those things we want to emphasize regularly and continue to point them back to that. In terms of beauty, we want to emphasize the arts. All of my children are required to participate in the arts. Thankfully, they enjoy that, but they play the piano, they're involved in music. We do artistic things, whether that's crafting or drawing, coloring, all those things. That's an important part of their development. We want to spend time going to museums and looking at great pieces of art. In our family, when our kids finish third grade, I'll take them to the Met in New York City so they can go to the art museum and see the things they spent the whole year studying in terms of the arts and stuff. And so that's an opportunity that they have to see some of the greatest works of art in the history of the world, and to be able to talk about those from this perspective that they've gained now, dealing with it from a perspective of truth and knowing what it is in terms of beauty. And then from that, we can deal with goodness. And we have a high moral standard for our children, and we hold them to that, and we talk about that regularly, and we want to continually emphasize that there is a standard that God requires you to uphold in your own life, that we therefore require you to uphold in our home. And so all three of those things are just patterns of everyday life that maybe at certain age they're not recognizing it for what it is, but when they see it and as it's worked out and displayed for them, that eventually when they really have a firm grasp on those categories, they're going to be able to identify everything they do within those.
Yeah. So, somebody is going to hear this and say, yeah, that sounds nice, but show me in the Bible.
Right.
And it will be the general form person who's not familiar with this or doesn't agree with this, you know what I'm saying? Because where is it in the Bible?
Yeah.
What would you say to that? Truth, beauty, goodness.
Well, I mean, okay, so truth is not hard to nail down, right?
Exactly.
But even think of beauty. I think we've talked about this before. Like when the temple was being built, when even the tabernacle, when we have the description of all that, what did God require? That you went and got the skilled artists.
The skilled,
exactly.
Not the most willing, not the
Right.
people who just wanted to. I just want to serve.
Yeah,
bro,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I got a good heart, you know. I'm passionate.
Yeah, you think
Of
about
non-paid volunteer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. When you think of music, like what do we see again in the temple music? It was the skilled musicians. So you have all these displays, and again, I mentioned before that we can think of God in terms of His own attributes, that He's all beautiful, that He defines what is true, He defines what is beautiful, He defines what is good, because He is all encompassing of those things, and therefore it's a reflection of who He is. Now, goodness, hopefully we don't even have to go into how we see that in the scriptures.
But on the beauty as well. So I preached on this recently. I mean, famously in Philippians 4, where the Apostle Paul says, whatever's true, whatever's lovely.
Yes.
Focus on these things. And lovely means beautiful, pleasant to the sight, beautiful things. And he almost definitely has in view things in the culture around them that were beautiful, that were good, that could be focused on. And, he encourages those Christians, as he encourages us, to surround. That's why I preach, surround yourself.
Yes.
Everything in your life, truth, beauty, goodness, things that are nice to look at, listen to things that are not, all of it, truth, beauty, goodness. If you do that, you'll find yourself being conformed to the image of God in Christ in everything you do.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Think about it. Good music, good literature, good food, good drink.
Like if you don't listen to things that can move you to tears, just the music. Or move you to joy. You're missing out on the human experience.
Yes.
If you don't read things that are taken into the story,
you're
missing out on the human experience.
I
just are, man.
And
you truncate Christianity.
Totally.
You're not even a real person no more.
This is an area where I think that Christian men can learn a lot from their wives, is that they sort of have a more natural bent toward at least the aesthetically beautiful, like physical beauty. That not only for themselves, which is great, we want our wives to display themselves as beautiful as they are, in terms of their dress and everything else. But even taking care of our homes
Exactly.
and things like that,
Exactly.
decorating. I've known guys who are just like, that doesn't matter. Why are we
Exactly,
worried
bro.
about that? Like, bro, let your wife do what she's gifted at. God's given her this gift. And if you let her do that, and you let her spend a little bit of money that you don't want to spend on those things, it's going to influence everything that's happening in your home in ways you won't even recognize. Planting flowers in the front garden bed or whatever of your house, that's more than just it looks nice when you drive by. It says something. It communicates something to us. And having those things in our environment, wherever we are, just hanging out in cool places like this,
Exactly.
just being around
It's nice to be
things
there.
that are beautiful, and it just changes the way you think. And sort of, I know for me, when I go and work in a place that's really aesthetically pleasing, it inspires new thought and new energy for me to be able to engage in the process of thinking and creating myself.
Yeah, it's good stuff. As a Laker fan, I'm worried about this conversation I'm going to have with my son one day. He's going to be like, Dad, is LeBron James truth, beauty, and goodness?
No,
Yeah,
no,
I
no.
agree.
There's none of
Like,
There's
no,
not
man,
one
that's
of them.
that's bad. No, it's lies, balding, and badness. And and then I have to go on YouTube and show him videos of Kobe Bryant, a true Laker. And so this is why we're Lakers fans right here. Show him some Kareem and some Magic. So
This
this
is real
good.
though. If
It's
a
good thing to think
generation
about.
grows up watching a guy like that and absorbing that, you imitate that.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
it's
not good.
Not
Yeah.
good.
For
at
real.
all.
It does
Yeah.
you harm, man.
yeah,
Yes.
man, just have a flopping generation.
For
Yes.
real, in life. Yeah,
It's
man.
flop.
Everything's a
Flopping in
flop.
life.
That's
Yeah.
how you get through life. You flop.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
That's what's happening.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's horrible. So, man, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation on truth, beauty, and goodness. And we want to keep talking with you guys. The best way to do that is to do that on Patreon. Join the Fellowship of the Cup, right? When you do that, you're going to get access to some top secret chat rooms. We're chatting with our people all the time on there. On top of that, you're going to get all types of goodies, bonus content, discounts, invitations to conferences that we may or may not be planning right now, and all types of stuff like that, right? So this is what you want to do. Join the Fellowship of the Cup. Go to patreon.com/wrath and grace and do that today. All right, again, we talk truth, beauty, and goodness. Until next time, we'll holla at y'all. Peace.